So regions. Regions are areas with similar characteristics. The first definition that you need to know from this little bit is the cultural landscape. Cultural landscape is the combination of cultural, economic, and physical features about a place. It's basically the impact that humans have on their surrounding environment. Example, Dallas has a different cultural landscape than Rome because cultures are different, economics different, the physical layout of those two places are very different. So they have a different cultural landscape from one another. And out of this, this idea of the cultural landscape came about a field of study known as regional studies, which looks at the relationship between human and social factors and the physical environment of a region, physical factors. So that's how places were studied kind of in the early days of geography, is that geographers looked at all these different things to determine the cultural landscape of a place. There are three types of regions. The first one is called formal or uniform region. This is another one of those words where there's multiple words for the same definition. And simply put, a formal region is an area where everybody kind of does the same thing, or they have one or more traits that just about everyone has in common, such as like language, ethnicity, things like that. Some examples here would be Texas, because Texans share kind of a similar culture. The Muslim lands in Southwest Asia, because they're mostly Muslim, practicing Islamic religion is very popular there. The Corn Belt, which is an area in the United States where corn is the dominant crop in the area. It's not the only crop grown there, but it's known for their corn. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can make a region into a formal region. Very important concept here is that this type of region can be based on borders, it can be based on language, it can be based on religion, it can be based on anything that really unites a group of people that are close to each other. So that is the formal region. Next, you have what's called the functional or nodal region. It's another type of region that has two names to it. In fact, all of these have two names. But basically, how a functional region works is that it is organized, the whole region is based around a focal point, a node or important focal point. It basically means like a central area. An example of this would be the reception area of 97.9 FM. Some of you may listen to that, the beat. And basically in this region of where basically the focal point or the node would be their central radio station. And you're definitely going to have more listeners near the DFW area because that's near their broadcast tower. So it's much easier for people to get that station. It comes in very clear on your radio if you live in Dallas or Fort Worth. So that would be the functional region. Now as you go further out from the Metroplex, from DFW, there's going to be less people listening to 97.9 because they simply can't pick up the station as well on their radios because it's probably just doesn't come in clear because you're too far away from the radio station. For example, Waco would definitely be outside of the functional region of 97.9 because the radio signal just doesn't reach that far. Another example is the good old pizza delivery map. Perhaps you've called into a pizza place to see if they'll deliver to your house and they may tell you, no, sorry, you're outside of our delivery zone. That map that's a functional region. The center point, the focal point being the pizza place, and the area that they are willing to deliver to would be the functional region. So here I've drawn a nice awesome little diagram where this would be the pizza place, and then here you have the delivery area, and here's all the areas that they will deliver to. Anything outside of this area is not a part of the functional region. So basically functional or nodal regions, they really serve a purpose. Another example would be like a newspaper delivery area, the area where a company would deliver its newspapers to. And finally we have the vernacular or the perceptual region. This is the most kind of vague region because it's really the hardest to identify. That's because a vernacular region is basically based on what people believe. It's all based in what's up here, how people think of a region or think of an area as being similar. An example of this, oh yeah, and they also believe that it exists because of their cultural identity. An example of this is, where does the South end? The South of the United States. Does it end in Florida? Meaning, like, does the South, what people call the South, does that end in Florida? Does it end in Texas? Does it end in Arizona? It depends on who you ask. Because if you can think of a mental map of the United States right now, just picture the continental United States. Texas is really like right in the center and it's south. So if you were to put a compass rose like this, you know, if you were to draw a compass rose on a map of the United States, Texas would be right where the S arrow is. So geographically, it is the South. However, people often refer to Texas as the Southwest. Like if you've ever watched Rangers, Stars, or Mavericks games, they play on a station called Fox Sports Southwest. And that's a way that you can kind of see that this vernacular region really does have an effect on, like, you can see this in your everyday life. So you're going to get a different answer from people based on who you ask. There's maps where people or organizations have taken surveys and asked people, where is the South? Draw a map of where you think the South is. And you could, if you ask 50 different people, you may get 50 different answers. So that is the definition of a vernacular or a perceptual region. It's all based on perception. Now we're going to talk about culture a little bit. The regional integration of culture. Simplest definition of culture is basically it's what people care about and what people take care of. Things that they care about is more like mental things that you may not be able to see or identify outright. Things like language, religion, and ethnicity. We know what language and religion are. It's pretty easy to understand, but ethnicity is something you may not have heard of before. Ethnicity is basically the combination of language, religion, values, physical traits, all the things that kind of make up the ethnicity of somebody. That's what ethnicity is. And things that people take care of is basically like how society gets material wealth. How does society get food? How do they get clothes? How do they get shelter? How do they make money? And how do they get stuff? Stuff being like your phone, or if we're talking about 100 years ago, you know, maybe the old school landline phones, like the old rotary phones that you may or may not have seen. That is an example of kind of the material part of culture. So culture is really broken up into two things, what people care about and what people take care of. And finally, we'll look at cultural ecology. Cultural ecology is the relationship between people and the environment. It is divided into climate, soil, vegetation, landforms, all of those things. And people definitely modify the environment to suit their needs, to make life easier for them. An example of this would be polders in the Netherlands. A polder is where people take land that's underwater and they drain the water from it and they make it into land that's usable for farming or houses or anything that you need. Another example would be the Everglades in the state of Florida. The state of Florida has made it to where people can actually like go to the Everglades, which is basically kind of a swamp, and be able to do things there. Another example would be dams and lakes. Fun fact, there's only one non-man-made lake in Texas. All the other lakes in Texas are completely man-made, meaning that they put a dam at a river and did it that way, or they just, you know, dug big reservoirs out of the ground and filled them with water from a river. So have fun looking up the only natural lake in Texas. There's only one. If you can look it up, or if you just know it, then that's awesome. Good for you. Regions, yeah!